Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
You really thought I was alone. I heard my own voice echo through the darkness, low and calm, like the hush of a slow tide drawing back. I stood in the narrow corridor leading to the basement, my heart pounding so fiercely it almost drowned out the steady hum of my own breathing. For a moment, I was sure they couldn't see me. I deliberately removed the single overhead bulb yesterday, leaving the corridor bathed in shadows and questions. She and the man with her were so close to each other that it hurt my eyes to see it. Or maybe it hurt my heart. I'm not sure which ache began first. I remember how earlier that evening, I'd parked my car around the corner, shutting the engine off as if I were smothering a scream. A single street lamp flickered above, struggling to stay lit. My phone showed 12:16 a.m., late enough for most of my neighbors to be asleep, except old Mr. Lanigan, who sat behind his curtains sipping whiskey until his eyes got too heavy. But I knew he wouldn't bother me tonight. He never did. I'd been careful when I slipped out of the driver's seat, stepping onto the wet asphalt, hearing the faint squelch of water under my boots. The sky threatened another drizzle, and the November chill crept through my jacket and the thin t-shirt beneath. Still, the cold felt good on my skin. It gave me focus. I couldn't quite bring myself to walk straight in through the front door. Part of me, some old naive part that remembered simpler times, didn't even want to step inside. They were in my house, or what I used to think of as our house, but in the last few weeks it had started to feel like a stranger's property. Walls that once heard our laughter now absorbed my resentful silence. The place reeked of suspicion, of betrayal. Yet I had pressed forward, adjusting the new lock I'd installed on the basement entrance just yesterday. That was the first sign something was different. I replaced doors, swapped them around, made the house's layout into a puzzle, or maybe a trap. As I stood there in the dark corridor, I recalled a moment from months ago, when I tried to reach out to her, physically, emotionally, any way possible. She was in the kitchen making dinner. I came up behind her, wanting only to rest my hand on her shoulder, to find warmth in that simple contact. But something inside me locked up. I couldn't touch her. My fingers curled in midair. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing one more step could end it all. She must have sensed my presence. She turned, gave me a brisk smile, then went back to stirring the pot. In that smile, I saw distance, hesitation. An invisible crack had formed between us, and we both pretended it wasn't there. Now, the memory of that moment stung harder than ever. Because I knew exactly why I couldn't touch her. My instincts warned me. The woman standing before me in the corridor was the same one who whispered sweet words, who promised she loved me once. But as I watched her, clinging to another man's arm, I realized how much had changed. The breath caught in my throat, my heart hammered, and all the guilt, confusion, and rage I'd been bottling up pressed against my ribcage, demanding to be let loose. In the dimness, her outline flickered against the half-open door to the basement, her laughter a low, intimate hum, like she was sharing a joke with him. Something meant only for their private little world. I recognized his silhouette next to her, tall, lean, with that easy confidence, the posture of someone who believes the world is there for his taking. I'd seen him once before, from a distance, when I first suspected. I remember the day I followed them after I caught a glimpse of an unfamiliar text on her phone. Maybe I was stupid to cling to illusions. Maybe I'd simply become a man who wanted to confirm his worst fears so that he'd have a reason to act. I changed the doors so they led from the front entrance down into the basement, like a labyrinth. A cruel joke, maybe. Part of me wanted to see if that bastard would know his way around what used to be my sanctuary. Would he understand how to navigate the same rooms where I'd put so much of my sweat, my money, my love? He didn't. Neither did she, apparently. They fumbled, giggling and stumbling. I waited in absolute stillness, ignoring the dull ache in my old knee injury. The place reeked of stale air and dust, an unplanned remodeling. I'd done enough fiddling with the house in the last week to make it confusing for anyone who didn't know the details. The lights were out up above, the basement bulb unscrewed. They stepped in, thinking they'd make it to the living room. Instead, they found me. "You really thought I was alone," I repeated, quiet, almost gentle. I felt the words cut through the air like a blade. They stopped laughing. I could sense the man tense, his grip on her waist tightening. My wife. Damn it. She let out a small gasp, half shock, half protest. "Andrew," she whispered. I heard her voice crack. That same voice that once soothed me with gentle reassurance. Now it was laced with fear. I didn't move. I wanted them to come closer, to try and scramble for the exit, to see if they could outrun me in my own domain. She reached out a hand in the darkness, probably searching for a switch along the wall. Instead, her palm grazed the rough cinder block. I heard a curse from the man. Something like, "Shit, it's pitch black. Where the hell is the light?" Then I spoke again, my tone measured. "The lights are gone. Doors too." I replaced them. Slow exhalation. "Did you think you could just walk in here like it was yours?" He tried to hide the tremor in his voice. "Hey man, let's not make this a big..." I cut him off. Too late for that. I heard his footsteps shifting. Probably he was about to come forward, maybe to confront me physically, or at least to push me aside so they could run. My heart hammered at the thought that he had touched her, tasted her skin. This wasn't just some random fling I could brush off. My wife had changed, her laughter, her smile, her secret calls. The arrangement of her clothes in the closet, the new lingerie that never seemed to make it into my nights. I'd felt something slip away from me, and in that moment, as the darkness pressed in, I knew precisely who was to blame. I didn't let him speak another word. I flicked on the flashlight I had in my left hand, straight into his face. He flinched, cursing again, raising an arm to shield his eyes. She pulled away, stumbling backward against the wooden beam that separated the corridor from the basement steps. For the first time, I saw the flush in her cheeks, that guilty swirl in her eyes. She opened her mouth, but no words came, just a breath of panic. No excuses, no pleas for forgiveness. She knew I'd seen enough. Whatever she said now would be too little, too late. I didn't step toward them right away. 1,000 images whipped through my mind. The day we got married, how she laughed when she accidentally spilled champagne on my tux. The nights we spent on that old couch, holding each other close after a day's hard work. The dream we had of starting a small business together. My construction background, her design flair. Then those images collided with the present reality. Her hair messed from his hands, her lipstick smudged, the lacy bra strap peeking out from under that blouse I'd always liked on her. And him, standing there with arrogance behind his shock, probably certain he could talk his way out of this, or fight his way out if it came to that. I recalled the phone messages, the suspicious out-of-town weekends she claimed were work-related. I remembered how she'd grown distant, as if my presence irritated her, how she'd snap at me for small things. And I kept thinking, I was too weak to stop it. I was a fool who saw all the signs, yet hung onto a shred of hope like a child. But that hope died in me tonight. I turned off the flashlight, plunging us all back into darkness. She let out a shaky breath. I could sense her tension rising, the way you sense thunder in the air before it cracks open the sky. The man with her, Max, I learned his name weeks ago, shifted his weight. I could almost taste the adrenaline swirling in the tight space. There was a half-laugh from him, false bravado. "Look, let's talk about this," he said, voice uneven. I said nothing. A strange calm settled over me, as if I'd stepped out of my own body, watching a scene I'd rehearsed many times. My hand brushed the doorknob behind me. I pulled it shut with a click. The echo reverberated off the concrete walls. That's when I felt the shift in the air. She realized there was no easy way out. I started walking, a slow, deliberate stride, forcing them to back up toward the basement steps. I brushed against the new doorframe, and I remembered how I'd spent half the day rearranging these doors. Just a half-inch difference in the alignment changed everything about the house's layout. It wasn't exactly a booby trap, but I wanted them confused and scared. The irony is, I'd built this basement originally as a safe space, somewhere to store tools, or to hide away from storms. Now it felt like the staging area for something far darker. We collided, all three of us, near the bottom of the steps. She tried to slide past me, but I pinned her against the railing with my forearm. I felt her chest rise and fall, pressed against me. For a second, heat flared in my gut, memories of her body, the closeness we once shared. But it only made me angrier. I let out a single breath, hot and ragged, smelling fear and perfume on her skin. Max grabbed me from behind, trying to yank me backward, but I twisted sideways, hooking my elbow back into his ribs. He grunted in pain. His hand slipped on my jacket. By then, I'd lost myself in a swirl of conflicting emotions. The gloom of the corridor, the scraping of our shoes, the heavy breathing. It all felt cinematic, unreal. Except for the pounding in my skull, which reminded me this was very real indeed. She ducked away, stumbling up a couple steps, hands flailing along the cinder block walls. I felt Max regain his balance, the floorboards creaking under his step. He hissed, "Back off." His voice was tight, uncertain, but there was a flicker of threat too. The man clearly worked out, his chest pressed against me with a coiled strength. I knew I wasn't a match for him in a fair fight. That's why I hadn't planned on making it fair. My foot found an empty bottle on the shelf by the stairs. An old beer bottle I'd left there, who knows when. I picked it up, brandishing it like an improvised club. "You want to talk? Let's talk," I said, my voice level. But inside, I was storming, a swirl of heartbreak and fury, because I saw the way she looked at him, fearful but also concerned. That look she used to give me when I came home bruised from a bar fight back in my wilder 20s. Now that tenderness was for him. It snapped something inside me. The bottle came down on his shoulder. The crack and his shouted curse echoed. He lunged, driving me against the wall, but I held on, slamming the bottle again. Glass shattered, sending shards scattering across the concrete floor. She screamed. I could sense her confusion, torn between horror and adrenaline. Max's grip slackened, and I drove my forearm into his throat. Not lethal, but enough to send him sprawling onto the steps. He knocked into her, and they both crashed upward, stumbling into the door that led to the living room. Only that door wasn't supposed to be the living room anymore. I'd moved it, swapping frames so that door led out to the cold night air once upon a time. Now it opened into another part of the basement storage area, a tight utility space with a low beam overhead. They scrambled forward, hands searching blindly for a light switch. I followed in silence, chest heaving, spitting out the metallic taste of blood where I'd bitten my lip. "Andrew, stop," she cried out, voice trembling. "We can. Please, just listen." My voice came out soft, oddly gentle, even to my own ears. I'd listened enough. That was all. Because in that moment, words felt pointless. The betrayal clung to the air. Nothing she said could erase the mental image I had of their affair, the nights they must have spent. It was all so clear now. And I was done listening. The next moments blurred. There was a scuffle in the darkness. My wife bumped into a steel shelving unit, toppling a box of old photographs. They spilled out in a cascade. Memories of my childhood, my family, the faces of my parents, my sister, and especially my brother, who had once been my closest friend. A fresh wave of anger tore through me. I heard Max cursing in short bursts, swinging at the air, trying to catch me. My knee buckled as he landed a solid kick to my thigh. Pain shot up my leg, the old injury screaming. I gritted my teeth, refusing to crumble. We tangled, the three of us. My wife's hair whipped against my cheek. I felt her nails rake my arm as she tried to separate us. Maybe she wanted to keep him safe from me. Or maybe she just wanted to stop the madness. But the madness had already taken hold. My shirt tore. I tasted sweat and dust. My breath came in ragged gasps. I half-registered a new shape in the gloom. Someone else had entered the basement. A voice called out, "Andrew, are you down there?" That voice. My brother's. My own brother, who'd always had a knack for stepping into the worst moments at the worst times. His presence electrified the air. "Hey!" I heard him shout, uncertain but definitely alarmed. "What the hell is going on?" I had no time to answer. The next thing I knew, I was staggering backward from a blow to my ribs. Max advanced on me, fists raised, knuckles glinting faintly where a sliver of moonlight cut through the tiny basement window. I lunged forward, ignoring the protesting fire in my muscles, and tackled him sideways. We slammed into my brother, who stumbled. I heard a sickening crack as he hit the iron support beam near the staircase. My stomach lurched. I vaguely registered a strangled cry from him, the groan of pain. My wife shrieked, "Oh my God, stop." Then someone, Max, or possibly my own flailing arm, knocked the shelf of paint cans. They crashed down, one after another. I tried to shield myself. Too late. My brother let out a strangled cough. Max yelled something like, "We have to get out." But the way was blocked by that heavy door, the new lock, the labyrinth I'd made. I swore under my breath, pushing forward. She tried to slip past me, tears streaming. Her face in that fleeting sliver of moonlight looked so desperate, so foreign. That face I once loved. Someone else was wearing it now. I let out a guttural roar, more from frustration than anything else, smashing aside the fallen paint cans. I seized her arm, yanking her away from Max. Her blouse tore under my grip. She spun around, losing balance at the top of the short wooden stairway that led to the old pantry space. A second later, her foot caught the edge, and she went down with a sudden, horrifying thud. I heard her cry out, saw her arms flail in the faint light. Then silence, except for my own breathing and the pounding of my heart. A box, small, velvet, rolled across the floor from her open backpack. It landed near my foot. I stared at it, my mind almost refusing to register what it was. The ring box, an engagement ring. She'd brought it here, or he had. It felt like a final, vicious confirmation that my wife had planned to leave me, marry someone else, maybe right under my nose, if I hadn't been so naive. My vision blurred with fury. I lifted my boot and brought it down on that box, grinding it against the concrete. Something crunched under my heel. The sound felt both satisfying and sickening. Then everything went to chaos. My brother, reeling, tried to pull himself up, clearly disoriented, blood trickling down his temple. Max shoved me aside, stumbling toward where she'd fallen, calling her name. I grabbed him, grappling with him in a clumsy tangle. My knees threatened to give out, but I clung to him like a man possessed, refusing to let him reach her. Not anymore. We crashed into an old workbench. A hammer fell off, clattering to the ground. Max snatched it up, swinging blindly. I ducked, feeling the air whistle above my head. My brother, dazed or not, lunged from behind, either to stop Max or to help him. I couldn't tell. The basement was too dark, too cramped. Bodies slammed. Someone screamed again. It might have been me. Another blow connected with the back of my shoulder, pain radiating down to my spine. Suddenly, my brother lost his balance. He slid on spilled paint, crashing face first into the same beam that had caught him earlier. A sickening, final crack. His body dropped, limp. Max hollered something incomprehensible, his voice a mixture of anger and horror. I froze. My brother wasn't moving. Blood pooled beneath him, black in the shadows. I couldn't breathe. I tried to move to him, but Max lurched forward in blind rage. The hammer raised. I threw out my arms, deflecting as best I could. The hammer struck the floor with a dull ring. We both fell. My elbow connected with his chest. My head snapped back. Another spin of chaos, and then the side of his skull slammed onto a protruding corner of the bench. It was too fast to register. Just a heavy final impact. He lay still, eyes half open. I saw the last flicker of consciousness fade. The hush in that instant was deafening. The quiet of a death that registers in your bones before your mind can catch up. In a heartbeat, everything changed. My wife moaned from the corner, a whimper that tore at something deep inside me. I scrambled to her, hands shaking, a numbness spreading through my limbs. I ignored the searing pain in my side, the warmth of my own blood trickling down my arm. The smell of copper and dust hung in the air. She lay on her back, eyes half-lidded, a gash across her forehead. Her breath came in shallow gasps. "Don't," she murmured. Or maybe she said my name. I couldn't tell. My head pounded too loudly. I looked over my shoulder. Max was sprawled on the concrete, eyes vacant, chest unmoving. My brother lay a short distance away, the iron beam slick with his blood. Two men who should have never crossed paths in that brutal way, both gone. Footsteps pounded upstairs, a shout. Then the door above burst open. Light flooded down, harsh and glaring after so much darkness. I heard more voices, frantic calls. My neighbor's voice was in the mix, old Mr. Lanigan, who must have finally done something other than stare out his window. "Police," one of them shouted. "Anybody down here?" "Police." I found myself kneeling by my wife, my hand on her cheek, trembling. I managed to call out, "Help! Over here!" My voice cracked. My chest felt hollow, my mind reeling, my body in more pain than I'd felt in years. The next few minutes were a swirl of flickering lights, paramedic voices, urgent commands. A policeman, young, stern, pulled me away from her. I resisted at first, wanting to keep my hand on her, but he shoved me aside, and I crumpled against the wall. Another officer crouched over Max, checking for a pulse. Nothing. He shot a glance over to the other still figure on the ground. My brother, the man who once taught me how to punch a kid who bullied me in 2nd grade. The officer's face said it all. He signaled for the paramedics, but it was already too late. My vision blurred again with tears. I wiped them angrily, my whole body shaking with adrenaline and some nauseating wave of regret. I heard them say, "We have 2 dead. We have 2 severely injured." Then more voices. "Her pulse is weak. Pupils are reactive. Let's get her on a stretcher now. And we got a laceration on him, possibly a fractured rib. He's in shock." Someone put an oxygen mask on me. Someone else tried to question me. All I could see was her face as she turned her head slightly, eyes flickering open. She tried to speak. Her lips formed a single word. "Love." She was crying, or maybe that was just blood. "Andrew, I love you," she whispered, so faint I almost didn't catch it. But I heard it, and it struck me like a punch to the gut. Because even in that moment, I wasn't sure if she meant it, or if it was just the desperate cry of a woman who knew everything was lost. I closed my eyes, shutting out the swirling lights, the shouting officers, the metallic smell of blood and paint. I clenched my fists. I could feel my own heartbeat raging in my ears. She said she loved me. After all this, she dared say that. I wanted to yell at her, to scream that she had no right to speak those words. But my throat was raw, my voice lost. My rage had no place to go. And the pain in my chest felt like it could shatter my ribcage from the inside. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The next hours are a blur. They strapped me onto a gurney. Sirens wailed, lighting up the suburban night with red and blue flashes. Outside, a small crowd of neighbors gathered, drawn by the chaos, the violence, the horror. I recognized a few faces behind the glaring lights. Some looked at me with pity, others with fear. My brother's body was carried out, draped in a bag. Then Max, the man who dared propose to my wife, while I was busy ignoring all the signs. All the illusions came crashing down under the harsh glow of ambulance and squad car lights. I remember the paramedics bandaging the cut on my forehead, checking my vitals, asking me questions. My answers were half-formed, my mind drifting. The house, the place I spent so many years in, the place that was supposed to represent stability and love, now a crime scene. Yellow tape going up around the perimeter, my entire life. Undone. Time lost meaning for a while. At the hospital, they took me into a curtained area, examined me. I might have had a concussion. I definitely had bruised ribs. I refused pain meds at first, wanting the physical agony to anchor me, to keep me from dissolving into the storm of thoughts in my head. By the time an officer came around to ask questions, I felt numb to everything. I answered in short sentences, not caring how it sounded. They told me she was in surgery. They told me the man who tried to intervene was in stable condition. Wait, who was that? My brother? No, he was gone. So maybe it was a neighbor or a friend. Honestly, it was all a haze. More words, more voices. It felt like I was in a warped dream, one I never chose. At some point, I realized they were letting me go. Maybe they hadn't decided on charges yet, or maybe they viewed me as too injured to run. A detective with tired eyes asked me to come by the station soon. My clothes were stained with blood. Some mine, some not. I felt the sticky dryness of it on my arms as I pulled on a spare t-shirt they provided. My reflection in the hospital's polished steel sink startled me. I looked decades older, with hollow eyes and stubble that had grown too thick. My shoulders stooped like a man who'd been carrying the weight of the world. I stayed in a cheap motel that night. I could have gone to my parents' place, but I didn't have the heart to face them. How would I explain any of it? My brother was dead, killed in that insane scuffle. My wife was in critical condition. The other man, her new fiancé, gone. Everything had collapsed in a single night. Part of me felt it would have been more merciful if I'd died too. Sleep barely came. The nightmares did. I kept seeing Max's face, twisted in shock, my brother lying there with that fatal wound. My wife's eyes, wide with terror, the ring box beneath my boot. By morning, I was drenched in cold sweat, my side throbbing, head pounding like a brutal hangover. I wanted to curse God, to beg for oblivion, but all that came out was a choked sob that I muffled into the thin motel pillow. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk days stretched on in a grim procession. The police questioned me again, trying to piece together the timeline. I gave them the truth as best as I could. That I'd discovered my wife's affair, that I'd grown suspicious and replaced the doors, intending to confront them. That the confrontation turned violent. I didn't plan to kill anyone, I insisted. I saw the doubt in their eyes, but I also saw a glimmer of empathy. Maybe they recognized a man pushed to his breaking point. Word spread fast. Gossipy neighbors, old acquaintances, the community that once waved hello when I drove by. Now they whispered about me, about the bloodshed in that old house on Willow Drive. My parents were devastated about my brother. My mother called me once, her voice trembling so badly she could hardly speak. "What happened to you two?" she asked, as if we were little kids fighting over a toy. I had no answer. How could I sum up a lifetime of mistakes, regrets, and resentments in a simple explanation? Meanwhile, news about my wife's condition filtered through. She survived, though with a concussion, a broken arm, and internal injuries that required surgery. They said she asked for me, repeatedly. They said she wanted to explain. The detective told me she claimed it wasn't a planned engagement, that it was a mistake, and everything spiraled out of control. That was her story anyway. I didn't want to see her. The hospital staff said I could visit if I wanted. I paced my motel room for hours, turning the ring I once wore on my finger, now crammed in my jacket pocket. A ghost of the life we had. Part of me wanted to hear her side, to find out how long this had gone on, to ask her why she'd chosen him. Another part of me feared the answers, because I still felt raw, like any word from her could either break me further or unleash a fury I couldn't contain. I spent my evenings trapped in my own thoughts. The physical wounds began to mend, but the emotional ones sank deeper, refusing to scab over. I kept remembering the moment I froze, when I tried to touch her shoulder and couldn't. Maybe it was the sign I should have read, a sign that our marriage was already rotting from within. I replayed that basement scene 100 times, searching for a way it could have ended differently, a path that didn't lead to blood on the concrete floor, to my brother's lifeless body, and the shattered ring under my heel. Every time, the outcome was the same. About a week after the incident, I finally worked up the nerve to visit her. I chose the end of the day when the hospital was quieter. Under the fluorescent lights of the hallway, I felt like a ghost drifting among the living. My reflection in the elevator doors, a man with a battered face, haunted eyes, bandages still on his left arm. A nurse recognized my name and gave me a sympathetic nod, ushering me toward her room. She lay in a raised bed, tubes in her arm, a thick cast on her right wrist, bruises on her cheek. When she saw me in the doorway, her lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes glistened with tears. I hesitated, chest tightening. For a moment, we just stared at each other, each of us trying to read the other's soul like a battered manuscript. Finally, I stepped inside, closing the door softly behind me. The air smelled of antiseptic, stale, and uninviting. I reminded myself to stay calm, keep my voice level, because I knew if I let my emotions fly, I might break again, and I'd had enough of breaking. She tried to sit up, winced in pain. I moved closer but didn't reach out. I didn't trust my own hands. "Don't," she whispered, sensing my approach. "I'm okay. I just wanted to see you." I nodded stiffly. My throat felt too tight for words. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her bruised cheek. "I never wanted any of this," she murmured. "I know you won't believe me, but, Andrew," I was confused. We drifted apart, and Max. He was just. I lifted a hand, stopping her. A small, controlled gesture, though my insides churned. Don't try to make it sound simpler than it was." She bowed her head, letting out a shaky breath. "It's my fault. All of it. I betrayed you. I betrayed us. I won't deny it anymore." Her voice cracked at the edges. My pulse hammered. I was aware of the intravenous drip, the faint beeping of the monitor. My eyes flicked to her cast. "You almost died," I muttered, as if stating a fact about the weather. She said nothing, just stared at the wrinkled hospital sheets. And in that silence, I felt the slow boil of anger again, but it was tempered by something else. The ghosts of what we used to be. Images of her laughter, her presence in my life. I sighed, forcing my breathing steady. "Why did you say you loved me that night?" I asked quietly. "When everything went to hell. Why did you say it then?" She swallowed, tears shining. "Because I do. I'm sorry I messed it up. She paused, voice trembling. "I lost sight of what we had. Max was exciting. He offered me something new, and God, I don't expect you to forgive me. But I do love you, Andrew. I always did." I stared at her, uncertain if I believed a word. The memory of her moans in that basement corridor, the way she pressed herself against him, overshadowed any claims of love she made now. But I also saw genuine regret in her eyes. The contradiction tore at me. For a few moments, I let the quiet stretch, letting my anger coil inside, seeing if it would burst free. It didn't. Maybe I was too numb to release it, or too tired. She bit her lip, sniffling. I was going to leave. I thought. Maybe I'd accept his ring. Maybe I just needed a reason to walk away from us. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to even tell you. I was too cowardly. And now, it's all gone. I can't fix any of it. I looked at her, this fragile woman in the bed, the person who'd once been my partner, my confidant, now a stranger. I thought of how she used to read magazines about design, how she'd show me color palettes for our future living room, how excited she got over picking out curtains. That was a lifetime ago. We can't. I said, voice rasping. We can't go back to what we were. She shuddered, nodding. I know that too well. I ran a hand through my hair, grimacing when I felt the tender spot on my scalp. Max is dead. So is my brother. The cops, they might call it self-defense or some kind of mutual combat. But I trailed off, swallowing the lump in my throat. There's nothing good left here. Her tears flowed freely now. I never wished for that. I never wanted. I forced a bitter laugh, quiet and cold. But it happened. Because you brought him into our life. Because I let myself get consumed with suspicion. Because neither of us had the courage to face the truth before it exploded. She tried to speak, but a sob choked her words. I found no comfort in her tears. All I felt was emptiness, a vacuum where my heart used to be. With effort, I turned away, heading to the door. My steps were slow, the bandaged ribs making each movement a sharp reminder of the violence. My hand on the doorknob, I hesitated, feeling her gaze on my back. Andrew, she whispered, brokenly, is there anything left for us? I closed my eyes, picturing the basement, the battered bodies, the ring box under my heel. The moment I chose vengeance over mercy. I'd do it all again, wouldn't I? Because I was too far gone. I inhaled the antiseptic-laced air, forcing my voice steady. I have nothing left to give you, and I don't want anything you have left to offer. Her muffled sob was the last thing I heard before I opened the door and slipped out. The hallway lights were blinding. The nurse at the station gave me a sympathetic glance, but I kept walking, each step heavier than the last. Pain shot through my side, but I almost welcomed it, needed it. I spent the next month drifting. The police eventually closed the case with no formal charges, citing a tragic altercation. My wife was released from the hospital and went to stay somewhere else, a friend's place, I think. Our house was sold off to pay debts and hush up a fiasco no one wanted to discuss further. The place that once was mine, once was ours, didn't belong to me anymore. I rented a small studio apartment near the outskirts of town, a cramped space with peeling wallpaper. The nights were long, the days longer. I took an indefinite leave of absence from my job. Couldn't bear to pretend I was normal. My parents begged me to come home, to talk about what happened to my brother, but I was too much of a coward to face them. Some nights, I sat by the single window in my studio, staring at the glowing street lamps, feeling the weight of my own cowardice pressing on my chest like a lead block. I'd lost the will to keep up appearances. And if I was honest with myself, I wondered if maybe the monstrous side of me had only just awakened, that part of me capable of violence and cold silence. I hated him, and yet he was me. The physical wounds healed slowly. Bruises turned yellow, scabs flaked away. My knee still ached, a constant reminder of that night's chaotic wrestling. My rib cage felt tighter, as if my chest was bound by steel bands. Sometimes, the ache was so bad I'd curse under my breath. But the worst pain was inside, an ever-present hollowness that sleep couldn't repair. I didn't contact her. Maybe I should have. Maybe a real man would have found closure, demanded answers, or at least tried to salvage some dignity. But I was done seeking illusions of comfort. The only thing I kept was my wedding ring, stashed in a drawer, a painful relic. Sometimes I'd take it out, stare at the scratches across its surface. In those moments, I felt a swirl of regret, pity, and a flicker of rage. Not just at her, but at myself for letting this become the story of my life. Days bled into weeks, and I found myself standing at an empty grave in a quiet cemetery, my brother's official resting place, though he'd been buried a few weeks earlier. My parents had done a small private ceremony. I showed up late, too ashamed to look them in the eye. Now the winter wind cut through the leafless trees. I wore a threadbare coat, ignoring the sting of cold on my cheeks. My chest felt hollow as I read the name on the headstone. I pictured my brother's grin when we were kids, how he once gave me a black eye in a teenage scuffle, then apologized by buying me a burger with his allowance. how we drifted apart as we grew older, each caught in our own regrets. Now all that remained was a name etched in stone, a reminder that some wounds never heal. I stood there for a long while, wrestling with the swirl of guilt and grief. I'd always assumed we had time to mend our bond, that we'd get a beer someday, talk it out. Instead, we ended in blood and confusion on a cold basement floor. The wind picked up, scattering dead leaves across the grave. My lips trembled, but no tears came. I was past tears now, or maybe tears were past me. A hand touched my shoulder from behind. I turned to see my father, his face etched with sorrow and age. Lines I never noticed before creased his brow. We stared at each other, the silence heavy with unspoken words. My mother stood a few steps behind him, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Neither of them spoke. They just waited, letting the moment envelop us. My father's voice finally broke the hush. "I miss him too," he said softly. I felt my throat constrict. I wanted to say so many things. How sorry I was, how it all spun out of control. But my father just pulled me into a rough embrace, holding me like he used to when I was a boy. My mother came forward, her arms around us both, trembling. We stayed that way, letting the cold wind swirl around us, letting the unspoken forgiveness and pain mingle in the frosty air. Eventually, my parents had to go, their old bones not tolerating the chill for too long. I stayed behind, alone with the stone and the memories. The wind whispered through the barren branches. For the first time, I let myself cry, silent tears that blurred my vision, hot tracks on my cheeks that stung in the cold, because I realized I was crying for the brother I lost, for the marriage that died, for the man I used to be before betrayal hardened my soul. Life kept moving forward, indifferent to my turmoil. Snow fell, holiday lights went up in stores, people shuffled around with their cheerful chatter, unaware of the storm inside me. I spent Christmas alone in that dingy studio, the only gift a bottle of cheap whiskey. I stared at my phone, a single message from her blinking on the screen. "I'm sorry." I deleted it. What else was there to say? The new year rolled in with gray skies, and I found myself applying for a new job in a nearby town. The old me would have tried to salvage my managerial position, keep everything afloat. But I was done living in the same patterns. I took a construction gig, something to do with my hands, where I didn't have to talk to anyone unless I wanted to. A small firm that specialized in remodeling old houses. The irony didn't escape me. Perhaps I was punishing myself, or maybe I needed to prove I could still create something instead of destroy. Every hammer blow against a wall, every chunk of debris I cleared out felt like I was exorcising a piece of my own past. It was grueling work, but I found a grim satisfaction in the labor. My arms ached at the end of the day, my knee throbbed, but at least exhaustion gave me something resembling peace. My coworkers left me alone, sensing I wasn't there to make friends. Weeks turned into months. The nightmares persisted for a while, then lessened. I began to function, numb but functional. Sometimes, random memories of that night would stab at my mind. Her frightened eyes, the ring box under my heel, my brother's last gasp. I'd push it aside by swinging the sledgehammer harder, burying myself in the present moment. The new pain in my muscles replaced the old ache in my heart, if only temporarily. One evening, I was alone in the workshop, cleaning up late after everyone else had gone. The radio was on low, playing some old country tune that resonated with heartbreak. I found myself humming along, pausing occasionally to rub my sore shoulder. My reflection in a dusty window showed a man with lines at the corners of his eyes, hair flecked with more gray than before, a tired slump in his shoulders. But there was something else in that reflection. A steadiness, a grim determination not to be undone by the ghosts that haunted me. I rummaged through a box of old tools, my mind drifting. Then I noticed a small ring half buried among stray nails and washers. A cheap novelty item, likely left behind by a previous homeowner. I picked it up, turning it between my fingers. In its tarnished surface, I saw the echo of that velvet box, the ring meant for her. My stomach twisted. I gritted my teeth and set the ring aside. I didn't need more reminders. I turned off the radio, letting the silence drape over me. My gaze drifted to a photograph tacked on the wall. The entire crew at some barbecue last summer. All smiles and camaraderie. I wasn't in that photo, having joined later, but it struck me how people could stand side by side, never knowing the storms each other carried inside. I ran my tongue across my teeth, tasting the bitterness of memory. Maybe it's time, I murmured to myself. Time for what? I wasn't sure. Time to move on, maybe. To let go of the rage that still flickered in the pit of my stomach whenever I saw a happy couple on the street. To accept that I'd never have the same illusions about love or family again. I packed up my gear, flipping off the lights. In the darkness, my chest tightened briefly. I recalled the basement corridor, that dreadful hush, the breathy laughter of my wife, and my own final words. But this time, I didn't let the memory consume me. I exhaled slowly, stepped out into the cold night. Each breath formed a small cloud in the crisp air, and I watched it dissolve. You really thought I was alone. That line replayed in my mind, an echo from that fateful moment. Now I whispered the opposite under my breath, though no one was around to hear. I am alone. It didn't feel like a confession anymore, more like an acceptance. There's a peculiar power in embracing the worst fear you have, being by yourself with your regrets. Once you face it, nothing else seems quite as terrifying. I walked down the street under the dim glow of street lamps, passing quiet houses where silhouettes behind curtains hinted at normal lives. I wondered how many secrets they each harbored. I wondered if behind those doors were men like me, torn apart by betrayal, by the unspoken distances that grow in marriage. I wondered how many women, like my wife, lay awake, questioning choices they couldn't take back. In that reflection, I found a strange solidarity. We're all carrying heartbreaks. Mine just happened to erupt in violence. When I reached my apartment, I climbed the narrow stairs, fumbled with my keys, and entered the single cramped room that smelled faintly of old coffee and stale air. I didn't bother switching on the light. I stood in the darkness for a long moment, letting my eyes adjust, feeling my heart settle. My ribs still hurt, a dull ache that would probably never vanish entirely. The doctor said I might have chronic pain. I believed him. I sank onto the battered couch, thinking about how a single moment can divide your life into before and after. That basement was my dividing line. Before, a clueless husband ignoring the warning signs of betrayal, hoping a broken marriage could be fixed by sheer will. After, a man who tasted the bitterness of vengeance, who lost a brother, who destroyed his wife's illusions and discovered her capacity for secrets, who discovered his own capacity for violence and control. I breathed in, slowly. Maybe this was my new beginning. A solitary existence, scared but alive, with a chance to rewrite whatever was left. I hadn't planned on writing any ending that night, but in a way I did. I wrote it with broken glass, with a locked door, with the small, cruel comfort of stepping on that ring box. It wasn't an ending for her. It was an ending for me, a final chapter to the naive man I once was. I closed my eyes. My heart thudded, slow and methodical. Despite the throbbing pain in my ribs, I felt something shift inside me, a faint stirring of resolve. I wasn't the same man I used to be. Part of me was destroyed. But something else, some core of iron, had been forged in that destruction. It promised I would survive, if only to see another day, to face my reflection, and say, I'm still here. And I won't be broken again. Darkness pressed in around me, but for once, it didn't feel suffocating. It felt like a canvas where I could, maybe, paint a new life. A life without illusions or cheap comfort. A life grounded in the truth that people can fail each other, that love can fracture, that trust can shatter, and that sometimes we only learn who we really are in the wreckage. I exhaled, leaning my head back against the couch cushion, listening to the ambient hum of the city beyond the window. In that moment, the final words I would have said if I had any left, pressed like a silent vow in my mind. I can't undo the past, but I can live with it. I can make sure I carve something out of this brokenness, even if it's just a testament to my own resilience. A slow breath, a faint stir of the night air, pain throbbing in my bones, and a quiet acceptance, like the last hush before dawn. I wrote that final page myself. Not for her, for me.